Welcome to our on-series webcast for Queensland stakeholders, proudly brought to you by the Office of Industrial Relations. Today's webcast is about the effects workplace violence has on return to work. We have Michael O'Hanlon from Beyond Blue here to tell us about workplace violence and its effects. OIR are committed to driving initiatives across the workers' compensation scheme that improve safety, well-being and return to work outcomes for both employers and workers. Michael, our presenter today, has over 20 years' experience in operational and management roles in the mining and information technology business. For the past 10 years, Michael has worked at Beyond Blue, an independent, not-for-profit organisation working to increase awareness and understanding of anxiety, depression and suicide. His current role as Workplace Engagement Manager combines his professional and personal experience of depression and anxiety to advocate to corporations, industry associations and peak bodies about the benefits of improving mental health in the workplace. We are pleased to have Michael share this research about workplace violence and the effects it has in a workplace and for workers returning to work.
Thank you, Marianne, and welcome to today's webinar, which will focus on mental health and workplace violence. The aim of the webinar is to provide an overview or an introduction to the topic rather than a deep dive. I'll provide links on each of the slides to resources that will enable you to source additional information according to your own individual needs. A key reference that I'll be using today is the Heads Up website, which is a resource developed by the Mentally Healthy Workplace Alliance and Beyond Blue. The Mentally Healthy Workplace Alliance is a coalition of government, business and the mental health sector, all coming together to promote mentally healthy workplaces. And you can see all the members on the slide there in front of you. So let's have a look at what we'll be covering in the webinar. There's the agenda for today. A quick review of what is workplace violence, what's the impact, looking at some of the risk factors, and then how do we manage the impact of workplace violence on mental health and considerations around return to work, and then some more details around where you might like to start. So, what is workplace violence? There's a definition here from Safe Work Australia that it's any incident where a person is abused, threatened or assaulted in circumstances arising out of or in the course of work, directed at the person or as a result of witnessing violence. And some industries in particular, like first responders, correctional services or the health and aged care sectors, are the most likely to be exposed to workplace violence. However, it's important to remember it can actually happen in any industry and any workplace. It covers a broad range of actions and behaviours that create a risk to the health and safety of all workers. So that risk to the health and safety is an important consideration. And there you can see some of the kind of actions and behaviours: biting, spitting, punching, pushing, throwing objects, verbal assaults, aggravated assault, any form of indecent physical contact, and threatening someone with a weapon or armed robbery. So that's quite a simple high-level definition. The impact of workplace violence can be seen in a number of different ways. You can see here a list of possible impacts: distress, anxiety, panic attacks or sleep disturbance, which are more on a psychological level, physical illnesses, muscular tension, headaches, reduced work performance, which highlights that this is not just an individual issue, but it's also a wider organisational issue. As more people are exposed to workplace violence, the greater the impact on the organisation itself. Individuals can suffer a loss of self-esteem and feelings of isolation, deteriorating relationships. They may experience depression, and at the extreme end, they may be at increased risk of suicide. So let's have a look at some of the risk factors for workplace violence. So there's two categories. There's one that's classified as external or intrusive risk factors for workplace violence, And these occur where a person who has no connection to a workplace and their main objective is to obtain cash or other valuables. So clearly it happens most likely in specific industries such as retail, security, finance, cash handling, transport and logistics, and hospitality. So then you can see some of the risks in these industries is working alone or an isolated area, or only with a few workers on site, at night or outside normal business hours, in unpredictable environments where you don't have a control all the time of what's happening, where you may be communicating face-to-face with customers and showing people, for instance, real estate property or goods or services, handling cash, drugs or other valuables. So it's where there's an external risk. The other type of workplace violence risks are associated with client associated factors. So this involves a person in the care of an organisation or someone seeking a service from an organisation. Again, you can look at industries such as hospitality, healthcare, disability, education, emergency services, police, prisons, welfare and community services. And the risks there are providing care to people who are in distress, afraid, ill or incarcerated. So the people you're dealing with are under stress themselves. The service methods can cause frustration, resentment or a misunderstanding, leading to the individual to respond violently. You could be providing services to people who have an unreasonable expectation of what an organisation or an employee can provide them, where you're involved in enforcement activities, carrying or having access to drugs, handling cash or valuables, or working alone in an isolated area. So that's a quick summary of workplace violence and some of the risk factors. And as I mentioned at the bottom of each slide there, you'll see some links to where you can find more information. So let's have a look at managing the impact of workplace violence on mental health and some of the considerations around return to work. In principle, managing the impact of workplace violence on mental health in the workplace is the same as for any other mental health condition. So we're really talking about how you might manage a mental health condition in a workplace where workplace violence is the trigger. First of all, as always, you need to address the potential workplace sources, respond to the violence complaint, support the individual who may have a mental health condition resulting from a workplace violence incident, if you can, helping them stay at work, because staying at work can play a vital role in a person's recovery by improving their quality of life, giving structure to their day-to-day life, contributing to a sense of meaning and purpose, and promoting opportunities for social inclusion and support. You might recognise some of those are very similar to someone staying at work from a physical injury rather than isolating them at home. Now, if we look at returning to work in particular, there are some barriers that could get in the way from workplace violence. The common one is that people fear their colleagues may find out about the diagnosis and then have negative reactions to them. So the fear of what others will think. There's a fear of lost connection with workers and co-workers, a lack of support and understanding from employers and managers. And this can be perceived or actual. If you are in a stress situation, you may have an impression that this is the case, or as I said, it may actually be that the employer or manager doesn't have an insight to what barriers could be there in returning to work. Not sure about the levels of support available. Stigma, the big barrier to do with mental health conditions. Again, it goes back to what will people think. And concerns about what work-related contributors to the stress and anxiety in the first place have not been addressed. So has the issue relating to the workplace violence been addressed? A couple of other things you might like to consider around legislative and regulatory obligations. Work health and safety and the bullying at the top and bottom of this slide, I think are pretty well covered and pretty well understood. The two areas in the middle I'd like to highlight, that's discrimination. Anyone experiencing mental health condition, be it from an incident of workplace violence, is entitled to reasonably practical adjustments from their employees under the Disability Discrimination Act. So managers, employees need to be aware of that. From an employee's perspective, the employee still needs to be able to fulfill the inherent requirements of the job. Privacy is another interesting area in that a manager or anyone who an individual has disclosed that they may be experiencing a mental health condition to are obliged under the Privacy Act not to disclose that to anybody else, except in the case where the individual may at risk of self-harm or harming others. And they can only disclose the information with the individual's consent and only for the purposes of, for instance, making reasonable adjustments or whatever the agreement is. So there's a quick look at workplace violence and the causes, what it is, and some of the impacts. Now, I mentioned to look at Heads Up, and this will give you a good idea of where you might start to do a deeper dive. Workplace violence is part of a broader environmental factor in a workplace. If you have workplace violence, have a look at what else could be happening in your workplace. Is your workplace a mentally healthy workplace? Does it foster a positive workplace culture? Does it manage stress and other risks to mental health, as under the Occ Health and Safety Act? Does it support people with mental health conditions? And does the organisation take a zero tolerance approach to discrimination, harassment and violence? So looking at this in a holistic sense, it's actually a culture within the organisation of which workplace violence may be one particular risk factor. And if you have a look at the Heads Up website, it's a central point for information for all workplaces, simple, free, practical resources. So there's free booklets you can download, videos, online training for anyone at any particular level in an organisation. And there's an action plan tool there that can help you step through some of the things you might want to look at undertaking in your workplace to improve workplace mental health. Here's a range of other information that you may want to have a look at. We've recently released a particular resource for health services, and it looks at including workplace violence. Similarly, we've developed one for police and emergency services. There's WorkSafe Victoria has an excellent website on health and safety topics under occupational violence, and Safe Work Australia also has some information around workplace violence. So as I said, that was a quick summary over the topic rather than a deep dive. I hope you found it useful. By all means, get in there and have a look. You can contact Heads Up, or I'm sure you can contact WorkSafe Queensland if you want more information. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Michael, for your expertise and the work that Beyond Blue do for everyone. Heads Up continue to do a tremendous job in providing research, strategy and support on workplace violence and return to work outcomes. If you'd like further information, visit the Heads Up website or visit our website at worksafe.qld.gov.au. Thank you.